gave it up. Okay, socio-emotional development and adolescence. Last week we talked about physical. So the big one was puberty. Puberty kind of changes a lot of things. Hormones, brain development. Depending on when you get your puberty, we talk about different timings of your maturity. Some people are late bloomers, right? Physically, some people are early risers, I would say, right? In terms of maturity and physical development. But here we're looking at the psychosocial sort of elements. How do you kind of form identity in this stage, right? It's of the utmost importance. You have probably high levels of anxiety trying to figure out who you are, people telling you who you are, your ideal self, looking on social media, thinking that you're going to be like someone, really identifying and acknowledging what you're good at, what you're bad at, not feeling bad and depressed about what you're not good at, things of that nature. So let's just kind of dive into. All right, so we say, hey, you have a complex self-concept. You're not sure. You just came out of, say, elementary school, right? Where this wasn't a real issue, right? You were probably still imagining that you were superhero characters or do things that are impossible. Here things are coming a little bit more real, a lot more socialization. Right? You have on one hand your parents telling you, hey, you're good at this. You should keep kind of doing this, right? You may have other people in your life saying, hey, I think I see potential in this because of your physical prowess. Just like being a baseball player, right? Hey, I see you have skills. Maybe you don't feel like you want to be a baseball player, right? Cause a conflict. So now you're disappointing people, right? Or you feel like, hey, other people identify that I'm good at this. Maybe I am, but maybe I have absolutely no emotional interest in it. What do I do about that? On the other part, you are socializing with a bunch of other people who don't look like you, right? Size, shapes, color, right? And you're trying to figure out who are you relative to these other individuals in your social circles, right? And you start to adapt a sense of an ideal self. Some do, right? Some may lag behind in terms of trying to craft an identity of any sort of ideal, right? Your greatest potential, who you think you should be. Complex. It's a conflict, right? Because none of this may resonate in any real sort of aspect. You may struggle not living up to be who you think you should be, this ideal thing. So we say, hey, all right, cognitive advances, right? Complex labels to evaluate self. Now you have complex labels. You're like, well, am I smart? If I'm smart, that's a label. What does it mean to be smart? Am I smart relative to who? Right? Maybe the school is not that great academically, and I'm just smart relative to these individuals. Am I good enough? Right? Am I beautiful? Am I attractive to others? Right? Am I strong? Am I weak? Right? What does it mean to be this? Even on an ethnic standpoint, like, well, there are some things we're born with that kind of make it easy for us to gradually kind of move into some self-concept, which is like, hey, our race and ethnicity. Like, okay, let's start there. That one's easy. That's a given. This is how it physically look. This is where my parents come from. This is our lineage. So maybe we start to form a strong basis on ethnic identity first. Maybe also with our sex, our biological sex. Maybe gender identity too. Right? Those are given. But the more complex parts is when we have to find things that we have to create ourselves. Things that are not given. It's a little bit more difficult. So it kind of predicts your adjustment, right? Which means positive outcomes, adjusting to society is a predictor on if you create an identity early on or later. Right? You can ask most high school students, hey, what is it you really want to be? A lot of them probably say, I have no idea. I have a lot of time to figure that out, right? Although that may be true in some sense, it may be that you're kind of just dismissive towards taking on the responsibility of creating a self-concept, which means that you may fall behind your peers in terms of creating an identity for yourself, and that could create issues later on with depression, feeling like you're not capable of achieving certain things, and things of that nature. Self-esteem, right? You say, hey, those who are mature and will develop a self-concept probably have a great self-esteem. They're like, hey, I already know what I'm good at. I don't have to question that, right? I already know who I am. I have a strong sense of self, right? We can attribute all that to maybe a high level of self-esteem, which is good for positive adjustment, right? Say those who don't know, hey, they're still in limbo. Not necessarily completely bad. You're like, hey, maybe they're a little bit more thoughtful, they need more time, self-exploration. Right? Maybe you need to explore more things to see exactly what you are good at before you make a true decision. Right? Maybe a little bit more realistic. Maybe you're a little bit more realistic. Maybe it does require a little bit more time. It's something we have to gauge. There's a pattern of self-esteem decline because of these factors, right? Not having a true identity it promotes a decline in your own self-esteem, right? Because others are moving forward in their identity. They become great baseball players because they decided that they're a good baseball player. They should do baseball. Some people have decided that they are intelligent and they focus on academics primarily, and they succeed. They manifest it through their own will, their own mind. Others are still doubting everything, right? They have self-doubt. They're not sure who they are. And maybe they have high expectations from their family, trying to promote something that they're really not. They really don't have an interest in. So we say, hey, it can lead to self-esteem decline, which causes issues like depression, right? Cultural influences on self-esteem. What could be some cultural influences on self-esteem? What are some examples you could think of? What are things within your culture you observe that may help your own self-esteem? Yes.
Things that might like lower self-esteem, like eating disorders within certain cultures. So like some cultures, it's like, you're too skinny, and so a lot of people develop eating disorders that way, and then you have lower self-esteem because, oh, I'm not the same shape and size as my family, or like, I don't know, the people who are living with.
Yeah, you can say, hey, you know what, in my family, everybody's a little skinny mini, right? If I begin to binge eat because of my own stress, I'm stressed out about school, romantic life, things of that nature, and I gain a little weight, now I have even worse self-esteem, right? Even in my own family, which is worse, because that's persistent, right? You can't really escape them for the most part, at this age, you can. What are some other things that maybe can increase self-esteem culturally, within your own cultures?
I feel like touching up on how what can lower self-esteem. What if like someone like me who are like feeling so out of touch with their culture?
Mm-hmm.
So like someone can feel like, oh, like maybe I'm not really like Mexican enough or whatever. Like certain things like growing up that can make you feel so out of touch and make you feel very insecure. Like
Yeah, you say, hey, mom and dad came, they still have the traditional values because they were born in that country. I'm more Americanized, right? They kind of have some issues. I am very Americanized. So that creates problems, trying to force me to be a little bit more, whatever the case may be. That can cause issues with self-esteem, self-doubting, right? Maybe some positive things too is some ethnic groups, primarily African American youth, kind of show views of high self-esteem. You would think it would be the opposite, right? You would think it would be the opposite because of attributions of low socioeconomic status and racial discrimination and things of that nature. But on the flip side, it may be the indicates sense of the low socioeconomic status, right? And the culture kind of promotes a, I don't care mentality, right? Kind of like, I don't care what people think mentality. That is actually can boost a sense of confidence because maybe other people are really caring a little too much, right? You may grow up in another culture like you should care more, right? So just in terms of self-esteem, it has been shown that African American youth, adolescents do have high self-esteem about themselves, which may be attributed to some of those factors. I say maybe from, dad's Italian, mom's black. So on the Italian side, particularly with the males, they do have a sense of high self-esteem. So I think my dad was extra confident, but maybe in a like antisocial personality disorder, right? Because of his rogue nature, right? Bravado. Effects of self-worth on behavior and well-being, right? We say your well-being can suffer and your behavior because self-doubting, what you're gonna do, you're gonna avoid the self-concept and play video games all day, right? You're gonna try to avoid people, be antisocial, get away from responsibility and the maturity. You say, hey, I'm not gonna get a job at 17, 18, because that requires capabilities, right? It requires getting out there, interacting, and challenging yourself, which could be an issue. But you want to have a healthy and coherent, consistent sense of self. Anyone here struggle in high school with kind of finding out who they were? Right? No one will admit it. Consistent, coherent sense of self. Hey, in high school, it takes a lot of sort of experimentation, right? It takes a lot of self-exploration. In high school, I hung around with gangbangers, drug dealers, crazy people, right? Just one-way ticket to jail and doing all type of crazy things, but I never actually participated. Hey, I was kind of like a passerby. I was like, oh, I thought they were interested, but then I kind of thought they were losers, right? But I thought they're kind of interesting just to have around. But I did kind of have a consistent sense of self. I was like, oh, okay, life is kind of like a game. I'm not going to take all of this a little too serious as most other people are. So I'll just kind of play the game, whatever could get me ahead of others. Those who don't have that, right, they have some issues with identity achievement, right? Achieving a full, mature identity, which we must construct in different ways, right? We say other ways to facilitate promoting that is authoritative parenting, allowing the adolescent to explore, but still guiding them, right? Being almost just like a counselor in some regard, but not kind of dictating what you should be, who you should be, you should date, who you should not date, right? All of these things. There's different sort of statuses in terms of this identity development, right? One of them is moratorium, right? The moratorium was there, the healthy one. That's the one where authoritative parenting comes into play and allows you to explore, but at the same time, kind of give you the guidelines on right and wrong. Right? So it's dynamic, it's challenging. We say, hey, some have diffusion, right? Diffusions are those who says, hey, I'm gonna diffuse, trying to create this identity. I don't wanna worry about it. I will just stay home. I don't wanna do much, right? We talked about that with video game players or people who just avoid kind of maturity. Foreclose is those who take on the status and identity of what others tell them they should be, right? You should really do this. You should really do that and be that. That's a negative outcome, right? Because essentially, if you're not that, you try to force yourself to become what others do, we say there's no sort of sense of emotional security. Right? You don't satisfy your own emotional needs, you're dissatisfied. And then we say, hey, other parental relationship potentially fosters this development. It's good to have a healthy relationship with your parents. This stage is challenging. A lot of arguments happen with parents because you are trying to be very independent, but there are limitations to your independence. But a good, healthy relationship is allowing you to kind of make your own decisions to a degree that is deemed safe in some aspect, without getting kind of too far ahead of yourself. Over here, moral reasoning and civic engagement. So here at this stage, you have your highest moral reasoning and maybe your highest civic engagement you'll ever have in your life. It tends to decline past this stage, maybe past the age of 18, which means past the age of 18, for the most part, most people stop to care too much about like engaging in politics, right, and caring about the community to that degree. They're more kind of self-centered. They want to build up their own incomes and their wealth and their families, right? Less sort of caring. But here we say, hey, you actually do care. Schools do promote you to be civically engaged, take on some sort of principle of morality, right, that you develop. If you get involved in some groups that go out and participate and go out and engage in politics. Promote it when engaged in mutual perspective taking, right? So at this stage you are socializing with people who have different perspectives. They come from different religious backgrounds, different ethnic groups, right? Which is healthy. Right? Understanding that your religion is not the only religion. You may not be right in all aspects. The way you think is not the only way to think. Some families don't really kind of attribute to this, even depending on the school. Right? Here, the good thing about this university, like even though it's religious, it's pretty open. Right? No one's forcing you to believe anything other than what you already believe. Right? Not promoting any sort of religious doctrine unless you go to theology class or something like that. You did it on purpose. Right? You say this is good. Other schools not so much. They promote some sort of ideology. Critical consciousness, right? We say in adolescence, this is your first exposure to oppression, discrimination. You may get pulled over by the cops the first time in your life after you get your driver's license in your car, right? And you feel that you may have been treated a certain way just because of how you look. Certain words may be said. You may notice that even in your social circles, like, hey, why don't I have as much as others? Why do I live in this neighborhood versus these are the people in my class? Right? You start to see the privilege, right? Hey, people do treat beautiful people differently. They get the job, even though they're unqualified, doesn't matter. It's like, hey, this is a reality. You start to see reality and it starts to bring about some sort of social justice reasoning to your mind. You start to acknowledge that, hey, life isn't fair. Like, what can we do to make it more fair for others who don't have the same opportunities? Right? And lastly, peer relationships, right? Here, friends are big. You're learning more from your friends than you are your parents. The big things for here is like loyalty, trust, you self-disclose, you tell the secrets to your friends. Your parents don't know the secrets, right? So you self-disclose a lot to your friends. The loyalty and trust aspect may be positive and negative. Maybe it's good that you're trying to build those, but then the reality of they crumble and you face trauma. Right? Hey, my best friend told all my dirty laundry. Right? I'll never get over it ever again. Hey, we were in the car. We were going to go do a crime. I thought you weren't going to tell because you're loyal and trust. Like, now we're all going to prison. Right? So we learn real lessons. But here he says important. Right? And when it's broken, you face high levels of anxiety because now you're trying to make sense of like, life is not the way I thought it was. Right? Cliques and crowds, right? Your peers can be situated in maybe short, say small groups of individuals, which we'll call cliques. Kind of have similar interests, but they may be different. They may be different genders. All right, so your cliques may have boys, girls, and like that probably lead to in-circle dating, romantic relationships. Usually, the romantic relationships have to be accepted kind of by the clique, right? Everybody's kind of judging the person you're interacting with in some way. Positive and negative outcomes, who knows? Crowds are a little bit different because you're kind of like, hey, the crowd might be the whole high school, right? You just hang around the crowd or different level of grade. Okay, we'll end up there, and I'm gonna let group 4 come up here and present. You're gonna bring your laptop?
I can take it. Good morning. We're doing theories on emotions in infancy and toddlerhood. I'm E.
My major. So my topic was Bowlby's attachment theory. So to start off, the theory states that early bonds between infants and caregivers shape the child's emotional and social development, either positively or negatively depending on the situation and impacts in their daily lives and also the environment around them. John Bowlby was from 1907 to 1990. He developed this social theory. That's why it was named after him, Bowlby's attachment theory. This allows professionals to approach pretty much a way to give care to toddlers, and it shapes our child care education as well, like daycare and such. It also influences many modern day psychology theories and parenting styles that we know today. The 4 stages of attachment theory are pre-attachment stage. It's from birth to 1 to 2 months. Second one is attachment in the making, 1 to 2 months to 6 to 7 months. Third one is clear-cut attachment, 7 to 24 months. And then formation of reciprocal relationships, 24 to 30 months to onwards. This is a picture of the stages. So 0 to 3 months. 0 to 3 months is where they're like pretty much they don't know much. They start to open up their eyes a little bit, try to see what's in life, whatnot. 6 weeks to 7 months, they start to pick their favorites, pretty much like either mom, dad, uncle, aunt, whatever, and they try to go to them for whatever they need rather than everyone. Third, now they actually pick their favorites, they point them out. Anytime they need something, they go to them straight away. And then the last one, they'll pick like mom, dad, brothers, sisters, and pretty much all their favorites. The first one's pre-attachment stage. It's birth to 1 to 2 months. This is where signals are developed from babies to get social response, pretty much like crying, laughing, smiling, waving back, and all that. And here they also rely on the caregiver to give them all the stuff they need, either milk, food, to wipe their face or whatnot. Here the baby also learns what their caregiver is. They learn their favorites as well, and then what they do to give them care. So they will cry or yell or something to get their attention. Second one is attachment making. This is where they choose their favorites. It's not solid, but they start to choose one individual that they go to for either they're crying or need to get soothed. Here they also do more playful and face-to-face interactions, so they do like peekaboo and all that to play games. Lastly, they also signal to adults. Like I said, they point to their favorite ones to get their attention and to get soothed. Clear-cut attachment, this is where their motor skills are developing more, and they show proximity to favorite adults rather than just one individual. This is also where they do regular interactions, so they do bonding attachments with mother, father, brother, sister, and they want to play more games, hold hands, I'd say like pull their cheeks and all that. And then lastly, secure base, this is where they have like a strong foundation, mom, dad, siblings, uncle, aunt. They go to them whenever they're scared or need to get soothed. And lastly, it's formation of reciprocal relationships. This is where they get their language, they start to talk, they start to laugh at jokes, they get to understand some of the stuff, not all of it, but most of it. But as they get older, they'll understand the language more. And this is where they also strengthen their relationships via the language. So they'll make jokes of either mom to dad and then dad to mom, siblings, uncle, aunts. And then lastly, self-concept. So this is where if you show them the mirror, they'll start to touch their face, their hands, their knees, and then they'll see that they're an individual just like mom would. And that's just a quote. And then strategies that parents use. Parents use favorites as a method to calm their baby. Some positives are that this strengthens their bond with their favorite adults, so babies are able to choose their favorites and just develop a long life relationship with them. The negative is this does nothing for the non-favorites, so they're pretty much there just to help out, but they don't get the attention that they need. And it sometimes could weaken their bond as they're like just the extra adult there, but they're not their favorite for the while. It could change, as I said, when they get older, they could form more relationships, but it's just a game of choice. And then another strategy that parents use is they stay in the child's room to get attention, and whenever they need something, they're there to run over. And that's a positive because it makes your relationship stronger, but the negative is that baby becomes too dependent on the parent, and sometimes they'll call you for even little things that they don't even need you just to get your attention. Some insights are the baby starts to work great to solve problems on their own, but they usually just go to their favorites rather than everyone else to get the problem solved. And it makes it harder for the parent because they usually need to be there at all times. If they're the favorite, they need to be there. Whether even, sometimes it's not even the parents, so like the uncle, aunt, and they need to be there just to get the baby to stop crying or just sleep pretty much. And that's not the quote.
Something else we got is Erickson's psychosocial stages. So Erickson's psychosocial theory focuses on how social interactions and relationships influence emotional and personality development. Unlike Freud, who emphasized biological urges, Erickson highlighted social and emotional factors. The stages cover a lifetime, but we're going to be covering the first two, which is infant and toddlerhood. These specific conflicts that need resolution during development. Early stages are foundational and shape an individual's approach to social relationships and self-image. So the first stage we have is trust to mistrust, trust versus mistrust. It's in the infancy stage of 0 to 1 years. And the definition is during infancy, the primary challenge is to develop a sense of trust in the world and people around them. So babies rely entirely on the caregivers to meet their needs for feeding and comfort. If caregivers respond consistently and sensitively, infants develop trust and see the world as safe and predictable. autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is from 1 to 3 years of age. And the definition is at this stage, toddlers are developing a sense of independence, exploring their abilities, and testing boundaries. Toddlers want to do things on their own, like trusting themselves and choosing toys, which build a sense of autonomy. And there's two outcomes for this as well. The positive being if encouraged and supported, toddlers feel a sense of autonomy, believing in their ability to make choices and control their actions. Whereas the negative is, if they are criticized or overly controlled, toddlers may develop shame and doubt, leading to insecurity about their capabilities and fear of failure. So why are these important? The impact of trust and autonomy on emotional development is very important because when trust is established, infants feel secure, forming a foundation of positive social relationships, and they are more likely to engage, explore, and respond positively to others. As for autonomy, success in this stage leads to self-confidence, which plays a big role in a child's emotional resilience. They feel capable and safe in expressing emotions and making decisions. If trust and autonomy are developed, children may struggle with insecurity, dependence, and emotional regulation. So how can a caregiver interact and shape emotional outcomes? Caregivers play a huge role in these stages as their interactions directly influence emotional growth. Consistency and patience are very important because a responsive and consistent caregiver fosters trust by showing babies that their needs are valued and met. They can also encourage independence by allowing safe choices. Caregivers help toddlers feel capable, developing a sense of control and pride. If the caregiver is overprotective or neglectful, they can provide emotional growth by limiting the child's opportunity to learn self-reliance and perseverance. Erickson's theory today in parenting education. Erickson's focus on early social interactions influence modern-day parenting practices and early education approaches. Emphasis on forming secure attachments and encouraging autonomy is foundational in many parenting guides and child-rearing strategies. Educators and caregivers often promote independence while offering a structured supportive environment, aligning with Erickson's theories of emotional and social development. Erickson's stages remind us of the importance of emotional support and autonomy and helping children grow into confident, resilient individuals.
Alright, I'm gonna be going over the role of temperament in infancy. So temperament is basically just like a child's natural disposition or personality trait that influence how they react to the environment and how they regulate emotions. Some key aspects when thinking about temperament is reactivity, so how strongly they react to certain stimuli, and then self-regulation, how will they manage those reactions and focus attention. There's biological foundations with temperament, so it's kind of like an innate characteristic that you have. It shows early on in life and it remains relatively stable. It's important because it affects how children experience emotions, how they react to situations, their capacity to self-regulate, and it sets the foundation for later development of their personality. There's 3 general types of temperament in infancy. Of course, children can fluctuate and go into different categories. We have easy temperament. The child is generally positive and adaptable. They have regular biological rhythms. They typically handle stress better self-regulation, and just an overall smoother emotional development. Difficult temperament, the child may seem more negative. They'll have irregular sleeping and eating habits. They're less adaptable to new experiences, and they may experience more intense reactions. So that's when you see temper tantrums, a lot of frustration and anger, and they struggle a lot with emotional regulation. Slow to warm up temperament, they may have low activity, they're slower to adapt, so they need to warm up to new experiences with repeated exposure. They can withdraw or become distressed in new environments or to new people. So it just takes them longer to adjust, so they'll probably be more shy and be hesitant in new situations. Interaction of temperament and environment. Goodness of fit model, so basically the child's temperament needs to match the environment that they're in. A goodness of fit is basically when the environment aligns with the child's type of temperament. It fosters a more positive emotional outcome. A poor fit is basically like if a parent is expecting an easy child It's important for a parent to maintain a stable environment, use calm, structured approaches, and gradually expose them to new people or new experiences, just so that like it's a smooth transition for both the parent and the child. There's not too much emotional struggle there. Some applications to support emotional growth on the parents and caregivers end. Recognize and respect a child's temperament, which can be very hard for a lot of parents. Use a consistent caregiving like type of model, so that it helps the children with difficult temperaments to regulate their emotions. It helps encourage self-expression at the right time and place. You don't want to encourage self-expression like at a funeral or like wedding. Be aware of your surroundings. Help put their emotions into words as they grow, and create a supportive and predictable environment to help the slow to warm up children adapt to new situations. Calm and positive responses can, in the long term, foster emotional security. Understanding and supporting a child's temperament will lead to a healthier emotional development and better outcomes in social interactions, self-regulation, resilience, and adapting to a child's temperament will lay the groundwork for their emotional health and social success.
Our fourth theory on emotional development in infancy is the social learning theory. So first off, we need to know what is it. So this is the theory that infants and toddlers learn primarily through observation. So this is more easily seen in both their actions and emotions are learned through exposure to others' emotions and actions. So it's slightly easier to see it in actions. So we will look at that. That can be defined by the old adage, monkey see, monkey do. So essentially, infants are able to perceive causal relationships. So in the study I found, the experimenters found that infants can link the sound of, say, a rattle to the person shaking the rattle without ever having to produce the sound by shaking the rattle themselves. So the experiment figured this out by giving them 3 sounds. 2 of them that they treated to. One of them was associated with the parent shaking the rattle or other caregivers shaking the rattle in front of them, whereas the other one was more of a recording by a voice recorder. The third one was in the experimenting phase, which was a completely new and novel sound, and reading the infant's EEG waves, they were able to figure out that the recorded sound that they'd been hearing through the voice recorder and the new sound, the control sound, had about equal levels of like novelty as compared to the sound that was associated with the rattle shaking. That actually stimulated the motor cortex of the infant, which showed a link between the infant's perception of the sound and its knowledge that it comes from an action, even though they themselves had never done the action. So along this method, or along this same construct, monkey feel too. So the imitation of emotions, the imitation of caregivers' emotions to a certain ambiguous setting is called social referencing. I have the book definition on the board, but it's essentially the same thing. Babies and infants and toddlers will look to a caregiver or an older person in order to fulfill basically 2 needs, both to seek information about this new setting or development in there that they're facing, and also to receive some emotional guidance, basically. So either whether that be am I justified in feeling in reacting a certain way, or just how do I react this way, or how do I react to this setting. So these two interact as in different ways as the threat level fluctuates. So if the perceived threat level is high, infants are more likely to look towards the more familiar caregiver or the favorites, whereas in lower threat levels, they're not really seeking emotional validation as much as they are seeking information. So they will look towards the perceived expert of the situation, which could be a more familiar face. It also could be an unfamiliar face. So, other considerations: infants are able to differentiate between facial expressions from birth. They just don't really have biases towards certain facial expressions. So it was shown that while they do not react to specific differences in facial expressions throughout like exposure to one or more, they are able to start linking the different facial expressions to certain emotions or certain positive or negative. About 6 months in, they start mimicking the emotions around them. So they'll start making the same faces that you're making, or they'll start laughing when everyone else is laughing, crying when everyone else is crying. Like social referencing itself starts becoming more selective at about 10 months. So they will start, recognizing that their reference or the people that they're looking to for emotional validation or information seeking may not be reacting to the stimulus they're reacting to. They may be focused on something else entirely, and so children are able to start perceiving when attention is focused elsewhere and being able to differentiate between, hey, they're feeling this way because of that, I don't really care, I'm over here, so I'm not going to base my social referencing off of them. They will not be my social reference for that situation. And by 1 year of age, they start using referential cues to attach that observed emotional reaction from their reference to specific stimuli. So instead of just being able to say, oh, they're not paying attention to me while they're reacting, so I should not be reacting this way, they start linking it to, oh, they're reacting to this other kid, or they're reacting to this TV show, attaching specific stimuli, so, yeah.
We had some Q&A, but I don't know if we're gonna save them for another day or something.
Yeah, any questions? All right, let's go through them really quick. What
Okay.
type of temperament did you have as an infant? Anyone? Do you remember?
Stories of temper tantrums, maybe?
I was a brat, yeah. I was the youngest kid out of 11, so it's completely different. Do you think today's parenting offers independence and supportive environment? Anyone? Did your parents, did they offer independence or supportive environments?
I did.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Let's give a round of applause. Hey, great job. I like how you started off kind of just showing us the different attachment styles, and as we can see as we progress through life, that they kind of persist, right? These attachments, people are either very loose in their relationships, they're untrustworthy, feel a sense of untrustworthiness, and they're solid. Complexities of the mind, how it evolves as a child, perception. Excellent job. All right, we will continue social emotional development on Friday.